I'm Julia Jones. I'm about to be on the Online Prosperity Show now. I have named myself the Chief Hope Officer for New Zealand, but you know what? I'm going to take that to the world and be the Chief Hope Officer for the world. And Prosperity and I are going to talk about mindset, how we deal with sudden change, and how we navigate this new world of AI.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga, here to guide you to online prosperity. And today, we've got a dynamo in the house. Julia, how are you doing today?
Hello, thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. You see, I've said a dynamo in the house. I can't wait for the main actor to come through in the form of a cute pony that you have that usually just walks in when things like this are happening, right?
Yeah, he did. I was doing an interview once to sort of get a MCing role, and I could hear him coming up the steps, and I was like, I had to be really focused, and so I just kept looking at the camera, thinking it was just a video call, and I just kept talking, and the funniest thing is he just came straight up and put his face in, but I kept talking as if he wasn't there, and it made it more awkward. So he's quite a hard case little thing. He's only the size of a big Labrador, so he's not it's not a horse, it's just a miniature pony, but he's just and he's a great character. Great character.
Absolutely. Well, you should enjoy that. So many girls grow up and always want to have a pony, and you've got one for yourself. So good on you for that. And
Well,
I
I've
hope
got big ones as well, but the little ones are a bit cheaper and a bit easier.
half the price, isn't it? Fantastic. Well, for those that are watching right now, you might be wondering who Julia is and why you should care. Well, I'll tell you something. You just heard her speak. She's not just a speaker, but she's a powerhouse of wisdom with a passion for navigating change like a pro. Now get ready to meet Julia. Obviously, she's this high energy trend translator extraordinaire. And when I saw her speaking and I've been looking at her work, I just thought we would have her on the show today. And this actually promises to be one of the best episodes we've had in a while. So buckle up, people, and giddy up, as Julia would say when she's riding her horses. And trust me, you don't want to miss it. Now, Julia, we've already gotten you a taste of the mic and things of that nature. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you are doing currently.
So I've sort of got a mix of roles. So I'm an advisor. So I help people with strategy and understanding global trends. So, there's lots happening around the world at the moment, and it can be a bit scary and a bit difficult to navigate that as a business and think about what you need to think about in the future. I've also do public speaking, so I on the stage I go and talk about global trends, and I occasionally MC events. And also I'm a chair of a charity called Meet the Need, which is a food security charity which gets food from farms into food banks, and that's meat and milk, so that we get good nutrition into those that really need it. So very mixed bag role there. My background has been finance and banking and equities markets and trading currencies and lots of different things. So it's been a really great career. I feel very fortunate. I classify it as a series of fortunate events for my career, and I've built up, I guess, over time some experience and hopefully really good knowledge. And I guess I've had quite a bit of forced change as well in my life. And one of the things I love to help people with is really understand that we don't always get to choose the change. To be honest, probably if we were straight up, it's probably about 80% of the time we don't get to necessarily choose the change that hits us. Good change can still be stressful. And I guess it's understanding how do we navigate that, and it's very hard if it's forced change and it feels like negative change at the time. It can be very easy to slip into a real kind of victim mindset, which is really hard because you never ever find a solution when you feel like you're a victim or something's been done to you. But when you feel like you have a sense of control, you'll be able to create the solution. So look, lots of things. I grew up with two parents that loved me dearly, who struggled through life. So they immigrated from the UK into New Zealand, and they used to call them the 10-pound poms, so that they sort of come in with pretty much nothing. And they, unfortunately, life never quite worked out the way they wanted it to. We were, as us three children, were very fortunate that they did come to New Zealand, but for them, it was really tough. So we grew up, using food banks, and mum and dad were always in a pretty bad space. Again, unconditional love all the time. So I'd never say that it was a bad environment, but it was a very dysfunctional environment to grow up in, and they were very much victims. They very much, life had been quite hard, and they struggled to see how they could navigate out of that.
Absolutely. And I quite like how you're using your life story and your experience to literally help others be to and have a happier existence. I mean, your past in finance and obviously knowing all these things in the banking sector would have gotten you in the front row seat to actually know what it is that people were investing in, which is basically trends and seeing what people were looking into. And that's what you help other people, see, around the bend.
Yeah. And the areas that they can take control in. I mean, I think with, one of the things that was amazing in the finance sector when I was in banking was sitting across the table from people who would believe that it was everyone else's fault. So, it was the weather, it was the currency, it was the interest rates, it was the neighbor, it was their employer. And often it's things that we need to take control of ourselves. Now, I'm not saying those decisions that we need to make are easy, but sometimes we need to make them. And when we drag them out longer than they need to be dragged out, the amount of people I would see relieved in the finance space when they would sell something that they believed they could never sell, or when they actually just were able to breathe and go, face the reality. And it's hard. I've had my own financial struggles. It's not an easy space to be in. But I think the more we can help people around their finances, the more honesty we can have in that space. And, one thing through mum and dad that concerned me is they would never talk about it. Mum would not open envelopes. She would not open envelopes. And when you don't know, it's really hard to understand how you're going to fix that or what the solution needs to be when you have no awareness of these things. And I think the more we face things head on, the better we're able to actually get on with things and sort things out. Then hide from them, because you can never outrun any of these things, right? Finances are very something that can be difficult for a lot of people. Some people grow up with incredible financial literacy, and some people don't. It's like a terrible heirloom that gets passed through the family of poor financial literacy, and I didn't have it. I had to develop it over many years, and you can get yourself in a bad spot pretty quick. So if you can help people understand to ask for help, face the reality, and keeping things in envelopes or whatever in the background, so you never actually have to face. It's not going to go away. The bill will magically not pay itself.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing that, because from what you're talking about, especially with the parents being 10-pound poems, they would have come in with hopes and aspirations of a better life and everything else, or whatever it is that they were promised, on the other side, and it didn't work out like that. And so many people go through life with expectations and with hopes that things would, turn the other way. Now, you mentioned something called forced change. First of all, could you maybe elaborate on that? And could you maybe give a parallel or an example? Because so many people might not understand, because that actually then creates who you've become.
Yeah, so forced change would be, as a kid, our houses were, mum and dad owned a couple of homes and they were sold at mortgagee sale. So you were forced to move, so they had to move out. As an adult, I've been made redundant twice. So, losing your role, things that you would not ask for naturally. and things that you would have to, it could even be something like, I've even had a promotion that was a forced change. Now, it might sound a bit silly to say that that's positive, but it was scary, and it was something I still had to deal with, and there's still a level of stress with that. So forced change can come in many different ways. I guess it's a change that can either be sudden, and well, it's mostly probably quite sudden and something that you don't anticipate coming, or even if you do, you may not necessarily accept when it comes.
Absolutely. The last couple of years have been a lot of forced change for so many people the world over. So that could be sort of a universal, starting point. Nobody anticipated that within 2 weeks we were going to have to stop doing whatever it is that we were doing, and we had to flatten the curve or whatever that meant at that particular time.
Yeah.
Now, so how do you navigate that? I'm not talking about the pandemic, but you had your two redundancies. How did you then step up? Because it's not easy to then stand in front of people in as an audience, as a speaker to an audience of people that are probably doing a lot better than you are, and you're telling them what the next thing would
Yeah.
be, or the trend would be.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You actually have to, and I sort of broke it down to three things. So one of them is feel. You have to allow yourself to feel. I think we've kind of all got taught that resilience is about being, really hard and just gritting it through. And I think if you feel sad, you feel upset, you feel scared, worried, all of the above. Now, you don't necessarily want to live in those emotions for long periods of time, but you have to feel how you feel. If you feel, you naturally feel quite rejected when you get made redundant. It's not something that, and now people don't wake up one day and decide to make you redundant and do all these things. It's a business decision, but you still feel rejected. You still feel like you were the one that was chosen to go. And so in that context, I think it's about feeling those emotions. The next part's accepting. Now, that doesn't mean you like. That doesn't mean that you are enjoying. That doesn't mean that just because we accept something doesn't mean that we have 100% brought on board with it, or we love it. It's just about acceptance, because if we don't accept something, we'll never find a way through it. And then the third part is adaptation. So how do you adapt from that? And the first time I got made redundant, I was very lucky that I spoke to a recruitment agent just to work out how to find a job, because I'd worked in the bank for so long, I didn't even know how to look for a job. And they just happened to have a job that was quite suited to my skill, but it was a whole big change, and it was actually kind of a different skill set. It was pretty suited my personality, but I had to develop a whole lot of new skills. This time when I was made redundant last year, I was very fortunate that I was able to do advisory and a lot of public speaking across Australia and New Zealand. And sometimes I just had to adapt, and it was hard for me to accept. And I'll be honest, the feelings that I felt as you get older, these get a bit more scarier. Your mortgage is bigger. You've got all these things, you've got all these commitments, and so but I think you've really got to feel, you've got to accept, and then you've got to adapt.
Like that, feel, accept, and then you adapt, because so many people just bury their head in the sand and just hope it will all go away, and don't actually do anything to get past that. And thank you so much for giving us this tool to actually start working towards it, because like you said, if you're feeling rejected, you just feel like
Yeah.
nobody wants you, the world just really has told you you're maybe non-essential, and that's not a good place to be. Now, I think it was Seinfeld that mentioned people would rather be in the coffin than give the eulogy. But
Yeah.
you seem to be trailblazing and speaking in front of crowds and everything else that comes along with it, despite what it is that you've been going through and everything else that's behind the scenes. How?
I think the first month was the hardest. I think for me, and you said it beautifully, you sit there and you wonder, why the hell should they listen to me? Who am I to be? But I mean, I think the key to remember is that for me, when I'm speaking, one, I get nervous. So I'm always nervous, regardless of how great I feel. I never walk into a presentation, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to nail this and this is awesome. It's always like, oh my God, why have they got me in? You kind of go through these things in your head. I think also it's 20 years of experience. So when I stand on stage and I talk, I'm sharing historical experience that I've developed. And, when I talk about global trends, so when I talk about political instability, and I talk about, supply chains, and I talk about all these things, we've got to always add in mindset in there. We've always got to think about it in that sense, because all of these trends can be quite terrifying for people to hear about too. So for me, I think as long as I feel I have something to add and I can provide value to people, that's when you can stand up. But it's always nerve-wracking, and I must admit, sometimes I have felt a little bit like, God, this has been such a tough month. Who am I to be standing up here telling people? You know what the flip side of that is, though? Is everything I talk about is, and I actually end all of my presentations with the serenity prayer.
Oh,
so that's please provide me the oh God, I can't remember it now, but it's around courage and wisdom and serenity. So it's, the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I think when you go through and you talk to people about these things, you're almost self-coach. So I think what I've found is, when I've talked about these things and I've had a day where I feel really bad the next day, I then realize what I've just stood up and told a couple of hundred people to do, that I have to live my own, I have to walk the talk. I can't actually just talk about this, I have to live it. So I guess the beauty of it is you self-coach at the same time as you're teaching other people when you're talking about mindset.
Absolutely, because you actually get to learn it twice. First you learn the topic that you're going to talk about, because you can't just rock up empty-handed, but you also,
Or never.
like you say, then you now get into a stage where you are literally self-coaching and things of that nature. But while all of this was happening, you said this is happened over a 20-year span. How did you, because there's got to be a passion in this, how did you discover your passion in helping business leaders navigate these changes, especially the constant changes that we're experiencing these days?
Yeah, there is a real passion for it. And I think I probably do. I'm probably at my best in environments where there is lots of change, and when things are a little bit feeling a little bit all over the place. It started very young. So when I was in my early 20s and I was a currency dealer, so I used to deal currencies, I got to talk to lots of people about currency and what was happening offshore. And at the time, I mean, it wasn't very common that most people wouldn't have a connection to offshore. We had the internet, but it was very light. It wasn't as common to have those big connections. If you got the Financial Times, it would have been posted to you, so you would have got it 3 weeks after everything happened. And so, being on a currency floor, we had instant information, we had all this amazing stuff, and so I just had this great passion for digesting lots and lots of information. I used to write a commentary in the morning. I used to get up really early and I'd read all the information that had come through overnight from around the world and write a commentary. So when people got into work, they'd have a couple of paragraphs telling them what happened overnight. And then I just sort of developed from there of really enjoying helping people understand things more, because I think what used to worry me is you have a lot of people who like to hold a lot of knowledge. And I think the more we can empower others with knowledge, it doesn't make you less important, and it doesn't make you go away. Realistically, we should all be trying to make ourselves redundant every day. We should be empowering people and currency was really mysterious to people. New Zealand, we're an export-led country, as Australia is as well. And, currency was terrifying for people. And I was able to help people feel comfortable and feel and understand and at peace. And so I think that empowerment and that knowledge sharing. And also, I never understood why people talked in like tongues. It was always crazy. People would be talking in this crazy jargon, and I'd be like, but doesn't that just mean this? Isn't it just a simple? And so being able to simplify things so that everyone, because you don't wake up knowing stuff, you learn it. So I was lucky. I sat in a dealing room with dusty old sea dogs who were brilliant, who taught me lots of things, and not everyone had that. So the more I could take that information and knowledge and spread it. So it started from my early 20s and it just sort of grew from there.
Absolutely. And I viscerally believe in life, we're here to live, to learn, and to contribute. And you would wake up, learn all there was to learn about all these currencies and all these places and different. There's also that whole cultural thing. Why do people do certain things and why is this
Yep.
important to them at this certain time? Why are we not focusing on that? So that would get you to connect the dots, so to speak. And then you could see where maybe New Zealand was missing out on, or things that were happening in New Zealand that other people were not doing elsewhere. Now, you've gone on and utilized that knowledge and information and insights, and you've spoken in Russia, China, and you've spoken here in Australia and Singapore. What would you say maybe is the key takeaway from you interacting at, first of all, at such a world stage and with such diverse audiences, so to speak?
I think the most powerful thing you ever get is what you learn, not what you teach others. So when you're in these countries, you learn so much. I think the biggest thing for me was not to turn up and be a dick. Like, don't turn up and think you know it all, because you don't live there and you don't understand. And even speaking in Australia last year, to agricultural audiences, I was really careful to do a lot of research, because you don't want to be tone deaf. It's very easy to turn up somewhere, and just because it works for me in my country doesn't necessarily mean it'll be applicable for you, especially when you're using examples of business. Russia was such a staunch lesson for me. They were very much about statistics. Now I tend to speak very conceptually, and so they wanted, how big is Russia compared to New Zealand? I think it was 14 times the size. It's how much land do you grow food on versus how much we do, and so it was a very different way of thinking and translating information. And ultimately, because of the language barrier, because it was all translated, you worked out that it was very, very good to have just statistics, because it was easier for people to understand. Whereas at one point I talked about fueling prosperity, and it got translated to biofuel, because they didn't, that concept wasn't, so when you think of it, so you've got to be really conscious of the culture. Even in the same, when I went into China, that was very much about the dairy industry, and that was very much about the growth, and again, they just wanted particular statistics. So you've got to be conscious of your audience, and you've got to be conscious of different cultures, and you've got to do your research, and you've got to really be respectful that you're in someone else's backyard, and that your examples may not be totally applicable to them. So do your best to learn and study, and always prepare.
Absolutely. If you can read the room and actually create for and relate to the audience that you're going to be talking to, I can only imagine if you start speaking metaphorically, the other people wouldn't understand.
Absolutely.
Right.
And even humor. Like, I tend to get a bit nervous when I publicly speak, so I tell silly jokes, and I get a bit, I think I'm really funny. But that doesn't translate in China. And when someone's doing a simultaneous translation of you for you, and people are listening to you through ear, they don't need your humor. It doesn't translate. Or you've got to also speak very slowly to allow the translator to keep up with you. And they're amazing, these translators. These are highly educated, incredible humans. But at the same time, like you said, if you're throwing out some random way of speaking that no one's kind of used to, you can't just be throwing that out there. You've got to actually take the time and speak in sentences. You've got to speak, when you're getting translated, you've got to make sure that you speak in a sentence that enables the translator to keep up with you.
Oh, I like that. So, in your sort of decades of experience, what's been the most maybe unexpected source of growth that you've encountered? Because you've been around people, you've been around technology, spaces, and all these things that are just constantly changing. What has actually been the one thing that you can point out and say, "Hey, this has been the thing"?
I don't know if there is one thing. I mean, I think that probably the digital era has become quite fascinating. That's been such a big thing. And I guess, as much as we all sort of found, I mean, I didn't mind the original start of COVID. I think that lockdowns and things like that kind of slowed everything down, which was probably not too bad for me in my world. But going from the stage to the screen was very different. and I would do maybe, in 10 years, maybe 6 webinars. It wasn't something I would do the odd video call, but most of it was on stage. It was in front of people. It was in meetings. It was, it wasn't. And so, to learn and go to that more digital space, to be recording yourself. I used to do dairy updates and we do little videos, and to be standing outside with my laptop filming myself. So all of these things have been quite dynamic changes. And I think we can fight these things and we can say we don't like them. And I don't necessarily love seeing myself on camera, but I'm not gonna worry about that and stop being able to share information and insight just because I don't necessarily like the way I might look on camera. That's just not the point. And you can have fun with it, and you can learn with it, and you can change with it. And it's just, I think it's just about developing. But that digital age, now we've got AI. So I wrote an article last week for Business Desk, which is a business publication in New Zealand, about digital transformation and strategy that we need for that. So what did I do? I looked for, I tried to do some AI portrait creations. Now, I'd never used that software before. I did find it really hard. I've got to be honest. I did feel quite a bit ancient for a minute doing it. I was like, oh, this is so hard. But it was when I did it, and then it's just all these different things that you use. So when we think about that whole digital age has really significantly shifted how we do things.
Absolutely. And it's hopefully making lives a lot easier for a lot more people. But at the same time, so many people, they just can't face the future that is being presented by this digital age. And you've been through so many of these changes, and you've been at the forefront of actually seeing them before they've actually happened. What is it that, Julie, you can indulge me if you want to on this question. What is it that actually then fuels, your constant excitement about the future, and how do you maintain confidence in uncertain times when you actually know that certain things are gonna happen or are bound to happen, but you're like, you know what, guys, settle on, let's go, and you're leading people to a future that is uncertain?
I think I have this weird thing in me just to never give up. And I think the thing is once you've given up, you've given up. And, look, when I got made redundant from the bank years ago, the reality was I'd made myself irrelevant. I hadn't kept up with things. I'd kind of got really kind of complacent and comfortable. And I think that was a really big lesson where you go, geez, if you become too comfortable and you don't embrace the future, you can't outrun it. And, there's a great saying, and I'm probably going to get it wrong, but it's something around, if you hate change, you're going to hate irrelevance even more. And I think the whole thing is the way to maintain relevance is to learn and to grow and develop. And you might not love some of the things that you do, and you might do them begrudgingly. But when you do them and you try them, the AI thing, I'll be honest, to generate those, it was a lot of time. It was probably time sunk trying to generate some portraits. It's, someone of 20 could probably do in 5 minutes. But for me, I went through 3 different programs because I couldn't work out some of them. And I finally found one, and it was, and some of the pictures were terrible and some of them were hilarious and some of them were great. And you have a bit of a giggle doing it. But I think, again, I had to challenge myself because it's going to be, everyone believes that computers will take our jobs. The computer won't take the job. It'll be the person that is capable of using the new digital, the AI, the new whatever's coming, that takes the job. It's the person that embraces that. And so the big driver for me has 100% been, I don't want to become irrelevant. I don't want to, and this is going to sound awful, and I do love them, but I didn't want to become my parents who literally gave up on life in the end. They literally, their jobs went away and they lived in like council flats and they were unhappy and they were, always on the edge with finances. And for them, it was just, they didn't see their relevance anymore. I mean, there was great relevance to them. They were amazing people, but ultimately, I don't want to become like that. I don't want to wake up one day and not see the joy in life in the future. And all crazy change brings opportunity. I think it's hard. It doesn't come and knock you, change will hit you in the head. Opportunity hides under a rock. You have to go and actually find the opportunity. Change will blindside you, but the opportunity won't. And I think you got to go out and seek it and look for it. And it's sometimes it's forced, it's hard, it's because you need a job, it's because you need to pay your rent or your mortgage, or it's just, I guess for me it was just that determination to not be irrelevant and not allow myself to be that, because it's fully in my control.
Absolutely. I like that aspect of not wanting to be irrelevant, because I mean all those years that you've put into working at this, and then some pixel or AI tool just comes in and says, yeah, that
Yeah.
all for naught. It would hurt. So, but also, in you working towards that, you're looking at where you've been and you're looking at what's ahead in the future, but you still gotta live for the day. How do you then balance being forward thinking, of which that is what you are providing to everybody else that you're working with, and still living in the moment without having to overextend yourself or stress yourself? Because that, half of the time, I think it was Einstein that says half of the things that we worry about never happen anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I must admit I'm not good at living in the moment. So I can be at I can be and I think that's why I love horse riding, because it's a tough sport. And I've got a couple of tricky horses, and I'm very lucky to have them. But if I go to little horse shows, like I'm not a great rider at all. Like I've ridden forever, but I'm a terrible rider. So I go to a horse show and I'm just like, there's nothing else I can think about other than that moment. But, I could be sitting on a beach and be worrying about the article I've got to write in 3 weeks, and I think for me, I think being very forward focused, it does make it really hard to be in a moment, to be in, to stop myself and go, this is actually great, be here now. So it's probably 50-50, to be fair. I'm not sure I do it often, but I'm getting better at it. I'm getting better at identifying when I'm not living in the moment, because I tell you what, if I have nothing to worry about, I will look for something to worry about. I will create. So it's sometimes about just keeping your mind. And look, I try mindfulness. I try lots of different things, deep breathing, all those things. And you just got to try what you can, and accept that that's who you are.
Absolutely. So if anybody's watching this and is keen on, just maybe getting in touch and connecting with you, what sort of unique value would you bring to either an individual or to a corporation if they choose to work with you?
The key areas for an organization is really around that strategy challenge. So, or review. Sometimes we just need to sort of have our strategy a little bit reviewed, and chat and talked with. I mean, it can be at an executive level or board level, where what are the trends, what's happening around the world. And I'm fortunate in the sense that because I look at global trends, it translates outside of New Zealand. But it's really the organizations that'll get the most value will be those who are just wanting to, I guess, get a bit of a test and just check where they're at strategically, and just, I guess, highlight a few little opportunities. And look, one of the things that I do with people, which sounds terrible, is a pre-mortem with businesses, and you go through it and you say to them, your business folded, what happened? And you have to work backwards and you have to look back, and it's just exercises. Look, I'm not magic. It's just like when you watch a sport on TV and you always see where the try should have been, or the kick or the goal or whatever you're watching. The reality of it is, when you're an outside set of eyes and you're not playing the game, it's always much easier to have that vision across something, and see something quite different. And I guess it's that different perspective that comes with a business acumen and global experience. So, and for individuals, sometimes it's just a person to look. I call myself a bit of a reality hammer sometimes. So I wouldn't say I'm a coach. I'm not great at coaching. I tend to like to just not give people the answers, but move it along a bit quicker. So, but for individuals, sometimes it's good to just either A, you're the one that's going through a heap of change and you want to know that someone else has been there, or B, you just want a bit of guidance. You're a bit lost and you just want someone to point you back, get you back on the road and point you in the right direction. So those are sort of the two areas that I can help. Or if people have got events where they want someone to MC and they need some energy, or they need a presenter, things like that. But mostly it's that one-on-one conversation.
Absolutely. And for those that would want to connect with you, what would be the best way that they can get in touch? Yeah.
It's super easy to get in touch with me. So you can either email me on juliajones1075@gmail.com, or LinkedIn. So, and I pop up LinkedIn as just Julia Jones. I've also got a website, which is juliajones.co.nz. And so any of those areas, you'll be able to easily track me down. I'm not hard to find, even though I have a very common name.
Fantastic. I'll make sure that all those lists or places are in the show notes there, in there. Now, you see, you started touching up on AI, and obviously you being the futurist you are, somebody who can see around the bend. What do you see AI doing, especially in the sectors that you're involved in?
I think in agriculture, it's probably going to be that sensory type of information. I think it's going to be about enhancing intuition, not destroying it. And I think for a lot of our farmers or growers, we've made them believe that, something would buzz across the farm and it would do the job. That's not the reality. It's just probably going to speed up. So what my greatest wish for the use of AI across farming and growing produce would be is that it reduces the amount of time that a farmer has to be exhausted and has to be in the thick of it, and it helps decisions be quicker. So and the other side of it will be digital traceability. So we need to be able to trace where food has come from. And this is going to run, and it'll be clothing as well. It'll be clothing, it'll be food, it'll be what we dry, whatever materials we're going to want traceability. But it's that enhancing intuition and digital traceability are going to be the two key things that AI should be able to support. And that will be measurement, that will be enabling us to know early if water is getting tainted, when we should be picking fruit, when fruit's picked and it needs to go into, I don't know, further ripening areas, that it will be able to understand that. It's all these things that we can use, that it can help, because chances are we're not necessarily going to get lots more people. I know we think that there's going to be this massive population boom around the world, but it will be in specific countries. Really, it's actually peaked in most of the developed world. And so what we'll find is that there'll be more need to be efficient and get productivity up. And I think AI is about helping the humans be awesome. AI is not about taking the need for humans away.
Absolutely. I quite like that view, because so many people are just crying wolf, saying, oh my God, it's going to take our jobs, it's going to do everything else and just obliterate us into oblivion. But I like the stance that you have in that respect. Now, we've gone in the past of where Julia has been, you blazing a trail globally and setting the trends and telling people what's next and everything else in between. Now, we need to know what's next with Julia herself. What can people expect?
Well, yeah. Oh my God, such a good question, because I'm probably a little bit all over the place myself at the moment. For me, it's about building up my business more. It's about working more with Meet the Need, the charity that I work with. The incredible founders of that did a great job setting that up and making sure that we get to a really, it's very difficult for charities this year. We're going to have people have less money to give, and the need is greater. So it's about making sure that we can find the balance in that. But for me, I think it's about getting some stabilization around business that I'm bringing in, so that I'm able to stabilize, move forward, and probably have a little bit more of an understanding and a little bit more stuff in the pipeline. I probably just don't have enough work in the pipeline. So that's the big thing for me this year.
Absolutely.
And learning more learning.
Absolutely. Julie, I think you owe us a book with the
Do you
stuff.
reckon?
Yes, with everything you've been through, your life story, your expertise all put together, you've had lived experience of all of this, and a lot of people need to know, how it is, especially when you talk about forced change and also just the victim mindset. So many people are going through stuff and they may not have a reference point or some place of, because you can't see the air that you breathe in, or fish don't see the water they swim in.
Yeah. Maybe I'll put it on the to-do list.
Fantastic. Even if you don't write a book about your tales, you could just write a day in the life of Platypus.
Well, I did actually write a little kid's book about him last year, and about how he likes to learn. So it's a little. I did write about him.
Oh,
If you've got young kids, I need to send you a copy over.
Absolutely, absolutely. See, I'm trying to make this episode longer. I'm just hoping he would just wander in, but in the interest of
No, it's too hot. I think he's jet black, so he's got himself. The poor thing, he can only last a couple of hours out in the sun, and then he has to put himself inside. So he'll be in this little shed at the moment, away from all the hot sun.
Absolutely. Well, we'd have to do it yet again, or you should actually do, like you said in the past, you go with your laptop and you're recording yourself. So maybe one of your content pieces, you'll be, giving us a highlight
Out
of.
in the paddock.
Absolutely. Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, what an incredible journey we've just been with Julia Jones, even though I tried to lengthen the episode, so just in case we get Platypus joining us, but you are going to have to look out for Julia's content because she has promised us not only a book, but also episodes with Platypus in the paddock there. And if you found this episode as enlightening as I did, I would suggest you hit that subscribe button. And hey, don't forget to rewatch this episode as it's packed with insights that could be a game changer you've been waiting for. Now, Julia, thank you so much for your time, and your expertise on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Until next time, it's Prosper and Julia signing off. It could have been with Platypus, but he had other plans. Bye for now.